Good evening. Good evening, students. I'm Monica Baumkamp-Ania with Education for Tomorrow Alliance, here with my colleague, Corinne Coulter. We are excited to welcome you to our first session of the semester. We have a great speaker for you who will give you some of his insights in his field and the path that he's taken to get where he is. And with that, I will turn it over to Corinne to kind of give you the lay of the land before we get started with an introduction.
Great. Thank you, Monica. Good evening, students. Welcome if this is your first time joining us for our Distinguished Speaker Series. If this is not your first time, I welcome you back for the semester. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We are in a Zoom webinar form, so students, we cannot see you, but you will have the ability to ask questions. And so you can either use the Q&A feature, you can use the chat feature, or if you hover down at the bottom of your Zoom bar, you can see some of the reactions, and there should be a raise your hand reaction. So you can submit questions throughout the entire time, but we have a dedicated kind of Q&A portion towards the end. Once we get into Q&A and it's your time to ask your question, I'll call your name, ask you to unmute, allow you to ask your question, and then I'll send you back to the attendee list. If you know your microphone's not working, just let me know that either within your question or quickly after in the chat, just so that I don't call you over and I can ask your question for you. If you are here for exploration credits, we don't have the one pager that you need to turn in, nor do you need to turn in your one page reflection to us. That will go to the teacher or the headmaster or someone who is collecting that for your school. So thank you guys again for being here. With that, I will turn it back over to Monica, who will help introduce our presenter for this evening.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce Blake Dewar. He's the Director of Strategy at Ovintiv. He grew up in Calgary, which we were just talking about that weather, and has spent the last 15 years working in the oil and gas industry. Over the course of his career, he's had the opportunity to work on a number of key strategic initiatives, including the Encana split to create Cenovus Energy in 2009 and the formation of and rollout of Encana's new corporate strategy in 2013. His broad experience includes portfolio transformation, identifying and creating both corporate and shareholder growth opportunities, and navigating through the macro environment to identify transforming industry trends. Blake is passionate about leadership and mentorship and takes pride in motivating people to succeed in achieving their goals. He holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree and a Master's in Business Administration. And with that, we welcome our speaker. We'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you very much, everybody, for having me. I hope everybody can take something out of it. I know we have time at the end for questions, and happy to talk about career questions, what I do, how we do it, what matters, what doesn't matter. Certainly happy to tackle that. But I thought what I'd start out with is a little bit who I am. Some stages in life, and sort of a bit of a lay of the land is sort of, from 0 to 18, from 18 to 22, and then all the way to where I'm at today, sort of what I learned along the way and what I think matters going forward, and then tackle some questions. So maybe just to start out, my name's Blake. Thanks for the introduction, ladies. Whoever wrote that bio there, filled it full of a lot of big words. Really, at the end of the day, I just do a lot of coordination, making sure people are in the right place at the right time and pulling in the right direction. And so people make it sound fancy. It's actually not that fancy. But happy to dig into that. But maybe Blake as a kid, I think, when I was reflecting on the session, I thought, how was I going to tackle this? And understanding where you guys are at in your development and futures and careers ahead, what that looks like. I thought I'd go a bit into my past and maybe help people understand how I got here today. So when I thought about it, I thought, well, from 0 to 5, what was I like? And I wrote down happy, interested, engaged. I like to go outside and play, and big imagination, and play with my little buddies on the street, and really had myself a good little time. I think the big thing was just a big imagination. I didn't really realize probably how valuable that was going to be until much later in life, and we'll get to that. But that was probably something that I I didn't value enough as a youth. And I certainly saw that from 5 to 10. So when I think about from 5 to 10, some of the things that I wrote down was had a bit of doubts, thinking about, well, how do I fit in? Where do I fit in? What am I good at? And started asking myself some of those questions. And I don't think I struggled as a student. I think I did okay, but I also think I probably didn't try my best all the time. I would find myself interested in maybe goofing around a little bit more than I should have. And, being 5 to 10 didn't really put 2 and 2 together. But I think the big one is a bit of that sort of doubt started creeping in, and, how do I fit in? What am I going to be good at? And then 10 to 15, some serious doubt starts to creep in, start asking, am I good enough? Looking at my peers and my friends, or, people that were around me, like, oh, Frank is really good at this and Susan's really good at that, and I'm not. And, popularity starts to creep in, and you start to think to yourself, well, how do I fit in? Where do I fit? And, I can honestly reflect back. I had some serious doubts about where things were going. And then from 15 to 18, it was probably getting worse, not better at that point. And it was, almost a give up. And I wrote down, it was easier not to try, because then I couldn't fail at it. If I didn't try, I wasn't going to fail. And then I could sort of hang my hat on, thinking about it after. Well, if I had tried, maybe I could have done it. Or if I had done this, I could have done that. But I think it was really just this mentality of afraid to fail, afraid to take a shot at something, afraid to look silly, afraid to be embarrassed, all those things along those lines that kind of creep in. And it was definitely a grind. I'm Canadian. Hockey's pretty popular up here in Canada, and I was a pretty good hockey player. I played hockey all the way up through 18, and I played pretty high level hockey. I hurt myself, and so couldn't play hockey anymore. And that was kind of the one thing that I always hung my hat on was, well, I can play hockey and I can do that pretty good. But when that went away, I was like, well, now what? And so, I did do okay enough to get into the University of Calgary. And I don't know if they were having a down year, and I just got to scrape in. But from 18 to 22, I went to the University of Calgary, which is in Alberta, Canada. And, I started out just taking general studies for the first year. And it was great. Like, all of a sudden I started to meet some new people and some different people, and started to make some new friends and started to make some connections, and having conversations that were probably a little bit different than I was having when I was in high school. Like, hey, what do you want to do? Hey, how do you think about this? How do you think about that? And that started to help me shape, like, okay, wait a second, like, how do I think about some of these things? And after my first year of university, I decided to get into BCom, which is business. And I thought, well, I'll go take a run at this and see what it's all about. And so I finished my university career doing that. And in my second year, I met a professor, and he was outstanding. He was somebody that just sort of thought about things a little bit differently, sort of made different connections, and just how he approached things and how he talked about different things and how he asked questions of the students to think about things. And I learned a valuable lesson in that year. And, I liken it to if you were to cover one of your eyes, if you were to cover your left eye, you can't really see what's to the left of you. And if you're to cover your right eye, obviously you can't see to the right of you. And really the conversation and what he was trying to enlighten us on is, it's the perspective that you take. It's how you see things. It's what you value. And if you choose to cover off one of your eyes, you're not going to see what's over there. And that might be where the good stuff is. So, I think that was a really important lesson for me, because I think for a long time I was trying to look out of the eye that I thought everybody else was looking out of, or what everybody else thought was important, or, hey, what's important is over to the right, so pay attention to that, and who cares what's over on the left. And maybe there was something for me that was valuable on the left, but I just wasn't looking there. And that's where I get back to that imagination. As a kid, like I said, I was pretty imaginative. It was a skill that, didn't really seem to get a lot of traction when you're younger. It's sort of do your math, do your social, do your science, do your English, do a good job, yada, yada, keep moving, just follow along. I think, that was when I started to realize that, hey, this imagination, this creativity is got real value. And if I start leveraging it, and I haven't been leveraging it for a long time, but if I start leveraging it, maybe I can turn this into something. And so I graduated university, and I did pretty good in university, made lots of great friends that I still have today. And that was invaluable. Met a lot of great professors, got an education, got to learn about perspective, got to learn about myself. And I got a job. We were done in May, end of April. I took from May until September off, went and toured around and checked some things out around the world with some buddies. Got back in September, decided I should get serious about finding something to do, and applied at Encana, and I got the job that I was applying for. So I started when I was 22, and I think I've just had my 16th or 17th year here with the company. So those of you that are good at math will know I'm in my late 30s now. And along the way, I've done a bunch of different things. Some of the stuff you heard there in my bio, but I think the next piece of the story is I got to meet a great leader here who took a lot of time, invested a lot of time and effort into me as a person and helping me understand, what is a job versus a career, and how do you think about those things, but also how do you think of yourself as a person? What do you value? What are the things that you care about? What are the things that you're good at? What are the things that you're not good at? How can you take what you're good at and line it up with something else, with someone else, and the things that they're good at, and then both be really great at something? How do you think about a broader team and pulling the skills and the skill set from a broader team and pulling them together so that you can really accomplish something? And that was kind of my first sort of baby steps into really realizing that, hey, I'm not the best at math. I'm not the best at finance. I'm not the best at, making presentations or doing analysis, or pick whatever you want. I'm not the best at it. And being able to recognize that and have an honest conversation with myself was good, because trying to be the best at it was going to be a lot of work, and I probably still wasn't going to be the best at it. But it didn't mean that I couldn't be good at it. And it didn't mean that I couldn't take all the different things that I'm good at, combine them together to be really good at something. And I think what I learned through that was different skills, different skill sets, different attributes, different character traits all have different value at different times. And it really depends on where you're at. In a time of crisis, somebody who can make a decision really quickly, that's pretty valuable. And in a time where you have the ability to sit back and think about things, being creative, being willing to challenge how we do things is really valuable. And so for the first sort of 5 years, I spent my time working in a team called portfolio management, and that was managing the portfolio of assets that the company has. And we drill for oil and gas, so we're an E&P company, explorer and producer. So we produce hydrocarbons, oil, liquids, and natural gas. And so got a crash course in that as well. And so spent 5 years sort of learning the industry, learning about the company, learning how to manage a portfolio of assets, learning how to work with people. And then I did my MBA in 2010, I think, which was great. It's a team-based MBA, so not going back to class to learn how to do 2 + 2 and this and that. It was, how do you work in a team? So you get big projects that you'd have to tackle as a team. You'd have to break them up. People would take different parts of it. You'd have to come back, put it together, present it, have it graded. And then ultimately, do you pass or do you fail? So I finished my MBA, I think, at the end of 2010. I haven't really done any formal education since then. So maybe that's something I should probably look at getting after here, because it probably gets a little stale. But I finished that, and that was a great experience. And the company kind of said, hey, do you want to try your hand at leadership? And I thought, well, okay, like I like working with people. I like figuring things out. I like taking the unknown and sort of going, okay, well, what's next? What are we going to do with this? And so I took on formal leadership. And the first year of that, I thought I'm a disaster at this, because I sort of went from the guy who was doing the work to the guy who felt like he was doing none of the work. And I sort of went back to, what am I doing here? How do I fit in? Like, how am I adding value back to this? And that same fella that helped, mentor me early on in my career was still around. And he sort of said, listen, cool down for a few minutes here. Like, this is going to take some time. You sort of have to figure out how things work and where you're at in different stages, and just what you're going to bring in and what you're going to offer at different times. And so with that advice, I kind of settled down and said, okay, I'm going to take a real run at this leadership thing. I'm not the guy doing the work. I'm the guy that's got to think about the work that's getting done. How am I going to do that? So I spent some time doing that, and things started to come together for me there, and team sort of got bigger and got a different job, and team got bigger and got a different job again, and team got bigger. And so still with the same company, but it kind of moved through some different things, and then got this big role called strategy. And it was, okay, well, now figure out what the strategy is for the entire company. Well, okay, that's a pretty heady thing to figure out. But what I had realized as I had gone through that was, surrounding myself with people that I knew were really good at things that maybe I wasn't good at, was a way that I could coordinate a bunch of different ideas, coordinate a bunch of different concepts, sort of know what I didn't know, because other people were working on those things, because they knew it, they knew how to do it. And at the end of the day, my job was to get these people at the right place at the right time with the right work done, to put it all together to make a decision. And so I've kind of leveraged that ever since then, which is, I'm going to coordinate people. I'm just a big traffic cop at the end of the day. I'm directing traffic to make sure there's not any major accidents. And if it all goes off the rails, I'm the guy that you call, hey, it's broken, can you fix it? Yeah, I can. But the only reason that I'm the guy that you call is because I'm the guy that's figured out, you call me, but I'm going to call a bunch of different people, and we're going to figure it out together. And that's how we're going to get to the closest to the right answer, because you never get the right answer until after you're done and go, oh, that was the answer. But I've figured out that working with a whole bunch of people is usually the best way to get closest to the answer. And if I tried to do it on my own, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to fail. And the one time that I don't fail, it's still not going to be pretty good, because I don't know what I don't know. And I can't do everything. And some of the stuff that I need to do, I know I'm not that great at. So I leverage my strengths. I ask people to leverage their strengths. We pull it all together. Now, what I think I've really learned through all this is that there are 3 things that I've kind of decided that I'm going to own, because there are things that I can control. And that's have a good attitude, be committed to doing what I said I was going to do, and be accountable to what I do and what I've done. And I have made some blunders in my career, some mistakes that I look back on them and I'm just like, I don't know how I kept my job, because some of them were boneheaded, some of them were big and ugly, but I was always accountable to it. If I screwed up, I was the first one to put my hand up and say, this is my fault, but this is what I'm going to do about it. This is what I learned. This is why it isn't going to happen again. And I think those 3 characteristics are actually really, unique and important, because if you have a good attitude about something, you probably have a bit of a smile on your face and you're like, all right, well, I got to be here. I might as well do a good job of it. If you're committed to getting it done, then you sort of set out at the beginning, if it gets tough, I'm not just going to put it down. If I decide I don't like it, I'm not just going to put it down. I'm not saying you should do something you don't like for your entire life. That would be silly. But, when it gets a little bit tough, you don't just give up. I think that's important. And then that accountability is, if it goes well, that's great. If it doesn't go well, are you willing to put your hand up and say, I played a role in that? And, as I've moved on and become a more senior leader, what I've also realized is, a really important, I think, leadership characteristic is when things go well, you give everyone else the credit for it. And when things go really badly, you try and shoulder as much of that blame, because at the end of the day, what you really need is those people that are working with you. And I hate the term working for you, because I don't ever want to be a boss. I don't ever want people that, again, I hate the term people that work for me think of me as a boss. I just want to be part of the team. But at the end of the day, if it goes badly, I'm going to shoulder the blame for it. And because I want them to trust me, I want them to believe that I have their back. I want them to do the best job that they can. And I don't want them to be afraid to make mistakes, because if you don't make a mistake, it probably means you weren't trying that hard, or weren't really taking that big of a risk. If you're constantly doing just enough to get the right answer, are you pushing yourself far enough to see what's next? So I always want to make sure people feel supported. And I think what really comes out of that for me, and looping my childhood and my university and my early career together, is you have tangibles, which you're learning in school, the A's and the B's, the 2+2s, all that stuff they're tangible, they're knowable, they're realizable, they're a textbook, somebody could read it, they could figure it out too. But then there's the intangibles, and those are the things that make you, you. And those are the things that you bring to the table, that uniqueness about you, and those are your strengths. Do you value those? And how do you put your tangibles and your intangibles together to maximize what you've got? And then if you can do that, if you can make that connection, now you have something, I think, that's really unique, because you have this ability to learn and to do new things, and the things that you have these intangibles, you know about yourself, you know what you're good at, you smash those things together. Now you've made that big, broad connection. And now I think you can do some really great things and rock on. And to me, that's probably where the real value in this whole thing is can you do that? And it takes a lot of time, and it takes screwing up, it takes success, it takes making mistakes, it takes learning, it takes people telling you, hey, maybe you could have done it differently. This is how. It takes the ability to listen and to take that feedback and put it together. And maybe that's where it gets into, what to me matters. And, I think I talked about that point of view. If you cover one eye or the other, what can you see? How does that change your perspective? What's your perspective? And I think that really matters. How you look at things, how you think about things really matters. And one of the things that I think really matters the most is what you think about yourself. And I liken it to a confidence scale. And I hope nobody's here, but do you have no confidence? You don't believe in yourself. You're afraid to take a chance. You're afraid people aren't going to like you, this, that, or the other thing. I hope nobody's there, but that's part of the scale. And in the middle of the whole scale is I'm confident because, I'm confident because my parents are here. I'm confident because my boss is here. I'm confident because my friends are here. I'm confident because there's a safety net. I'm willing to take a chance. And that's not a bad place to be. But then there's self-confidence, and I'm confident in myself. I'm confident in my skills and my ability that, I don't maybe need a safety net all the time, or I'm willing to take a bit of a chance or take a bit of a risk or put myself out there a little bit to try something new. And I think when you value what you have and you value yourself, I think it can take you a long, long way, because then it takes the governor off of I'm scared because, or I don't want to take that chance. It's, hey, I'm going to take this calculated chance now. I'll go out breaking the law and things like that. These are making smart choices. Take that next step and, what is the next best choice for me, but then being willing to take it. And I think the other piece is, take people with you. I hear people say all the time, and I remember them saying it to me in university, look to the left of you, look to the right of you, those people won't be there. It's like, well, it's set up to be a big competition. The reality is, I'm not sure that's actually how this whole thing works. And I can assure you that it doesn't work very well when everybody's trying to just do what's best for them and all pull in different directions. So I like to tell people is look to your left and look to your right and ask yourself, can I take these people along with me? Can we all pull in the same direction? And can we all realize some value and get somewhere together? Because someone else's success doesn't mean that you're a failure, or it doesn't mean that you failed. It just meant that they were successful. Did you play a role in their success? And maybe next time you'll be the one that's successful and they will have played a role in yours. So try to take people with you. It's the best way to get where you're going. And I think you'll have a lot more fun doing it. And then the last big one, and I think it's becoming bigger and bigger, as this world keeps turning and time keeps passing, is compromise. Can you compromise? You're not always going to get what you want, and it's not always going to go your way. Can you figure out how to work in? Can you figure out how to work what you want and what someone else wants in together, so you can both get at least some of what you want? Because standing there arguing about, well, I want this, well, I want that, gets nobody anywhere. So, being able to listen to someone else's opinion, to someone else's point of view, has real value. And just because you're listening doesn't mean that you unconditionally agree with them. It just means you're educating yourself and you're opening up your perspective to see things differently. And maybe you still won't agree at the end, but at least you'll be educated on what the other person is thinking or what the other group is thinking. And that has real value, because flying into things blind, not willing to compromise, it gets nobody anywhere, and the chances of failure are much, much higher. So I think at the end of the day, believe in yourself, be confident in yourself, understand what you're good at, take people with you along the way, be willing to compromise, and lean on some character principles. Mine are the attitude, commitment, and accountability, and putting the tangible and the intangible together to really realize where you're going and what you want to do. And then recognize that it doesn't always go smooth and it doesn't always go perfect. I haven't really talked a whole bunch about my career, and so I'm happy to take any sort of questions that you guys have, but definitely fire some questions over to me if you're interested in my career. But that's kind of the stuff that, when they asked me to do this, I thought, well, I think this is important to me. Careers can take a bunch of different shapes. You can go and work for the municipality that you live in. You can go and work for a sports team. You can go to work for Google, or you can come and work for an oil and gas company. Like the world is honestly your oyster. So careers can look different, and will all look different. Nobody's career is going to look the same as the next guy's or girls. So I didn't spend a ton of time on my career. I think for me, what you do now and how you start to think about things now will shape the career. It's really the success and the happiness, and career success, as I said, the word success is measured in many different ways. Sometimes I think we put a lot of weight towards, well, how much money do you think you're going to make? Well, I know lots of people who make lots of money and they're not very happy. And I do sit back sometimes and wonder to myself, you got a lot of money, but you're very unhappy. And at the end of this ride, when it's my time is up or their time is up, I'd like to think that I had fun while I did it, made a few bucks so I could live a halfway decent lifestyle, but you're not taking it with you. And I think there's probably too much focus on that. So understanding what success looks like is probably a pretty important question to start thinking about as well. But now I'm just rambling, so I'll turn it back over to the facilitators, and if you guys have questions, fire away.
All right, thank you. Yes, we have had some questions come in. So James, I'm going to bring you over if you can unmute and ask your question.
Hello. My question is, you said initially you worked as like portfolio management. What sort of was that?
It's a good question, James. So portfolio management is, really understanding the company and what makes the company. So at the time we were about $120 billion company. So we were the largest super independent in the world. And we were on our way to being a mini major, which is about 1 million barrels a day. And so, in order to get all that production, we had a bunch of different assets. And part of my job was to figure out, well, how do we take the right combination of assets to get the most bang for our buck so that our shareholders can make the most money that they can from investing in the entity. So if we had 3 options and one option was gonna make a rate of return, or if we invested $10, we were gonna get $12 of money back. Okay, well, that's $2, and we were gonna get that in a year. We had other projects where we were gonna have to invest $20 and we were gonna get $30 back, but that was gonna be over 5 years. Well, which is the better option? Well, you'd say, well, one, I spend 20, I get 30, that's a pretty good option. Yeah, but it's gonna take a number of years. The other option is, well, I spend 10 and I get $2 back. Well, I get that in the same year. Well, which one is better? Well, it depends. It depends what you need at the time. It depends what you're trying to accomplish. It depends how many other assets do you have that are longer term return, shorter term return. So really it was about pulling together the right composition of assets and funding them at the right level to maximize the company's return.
Wow. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and ask the question. You talked a lot about teams. Students at this age, a lot of them, they tolerate activities that require, teamwork in schools, or we get a lot of students that are like, yes, I don't mind teamwork as long as I'm in charge, right? So at some point in time, we all have someone on our team that we're like, that's maybe not the person we would choose for any number of reasons, right? What do you do, or what have you done when you have someone that's just difficult to work with, whether it's personality thing, or you don't want, any number of reasons, right? It could be that they only want to do things their way. They don't want to work that hard. How do you kind of bring that person on board? Because in a good functioning team, if everyone's on board and everyone's ready to do the things that need to be done, that's a beautiful moment, right? But it's not always exactly like that. So what, can you share an example of a time that you kind of had to work through that, or how you kind of were able to bring someone where they needed to be with some mentoring?
Yeah. That's a great question. And that's a really tough one to answer too, because they're all different. I think the biggest ones, again, I'll go back to, what I learned about myself, and the big one is have a good attitude. I think it's easy to get frustrated when you feel like, well, this person isn't pulling their weight. And, certainly as my role has changed, I guess I have more authority to just say, well, get it done. Never like to do that. But if I go back to earlier in my career, when I would have been just a team member and there was another team member, and I was like, well, this person's killing me because they're not doing their job. I think what I learned early on goes back to that compromise and back to that understanding is, well, sit down and talk to them like, hey, what's going on here? Like, that's a question that's pretty open-ended, right? And there's been times where I've asked that question. I've learned a whole bunch about somebody just by asking, hey, what's going on? You know what, my dad just died, or hey, I'm dealing with something really tough at home. Like that really all of a sudden changes your perspective. Like, okay, wait a second, like there's more to this. Like now all of a sudden I feel different about it. I'm approaching it differently. Now, there are other times where you ask somebody, well, what's going on? And they tell you, well, I just don't feel like doing this, or I don't want to work that hard. I think you have to make a choice early on, and you have to say, well, look, what matters to me? I want to do a good job. I want to get this done. They're not going to help, or they're going to be minimal help. So I just take it on and whatever they're not going to do and do it, maybe. Or do I go and talk to them and say, hey, listen, like the rest of us are pulling really hard here. Kind of feels like you're the one that's not. Like, we're going to need you to start getting after it here. They could tell me, hey, beat it. I don't care what you think. And then I got another choice. Do I go to the person who maybe has a bit of authority and say, hey, by the way, I don't feel like person X is pulling their weight, and it's grinding on the team. Do you have any ideas, or do you have any suggestions? Obviously, I think the first one is the best one, where you ask the person, hey, what's going on? Maybe you can figure it out. Maybe they say, look, I don't understand. Well, here, let's figure it out together. So I think that's the best approach. The last approach is going to the person with authority. When I change to my role now, if somebody comes and says, hey, we're really struggling with this person. Well, okay, but have we exhausted all of the other options? Have you guys spent some time thinking about, well, how do we get so-and-so to be a better contributor? And if that hasn't been done yet, the first thing I'm going to say is, well, you should probably go back and talk to them and see if you guys can figure it out. Because what I don't want to do is have people just think that whenever things don't go their way, well, just come talk to me and I'll make it go their way. That's not how this is going to work. So I think at the end of the day, it gets back to understanding yourself, trying to understand other people, those perspectives. How do you figure out how to align those perspectives? Do you have to make some compromise? But how do you make sure that as many people as you can are going to get what they want out of it, so as many people can move forward and try and be successful? But listen, that's one of the biggest things that I think every company struggles with, because it's really hard. I mean, we've got about 3,000 people that work here, and it's unfortunate, but there aren't 3,000 people that are giving it their 110%, and maybe 110% is asking too much. I don't think there's 3,000 people that are giving it 80%. Now, I do think we have a pretty good culture, and culture has a good team culture, a good company culture has a way of setting expectations and either getting people to fall in line and go, hey, if I want to be a part of this, this is kind of the way that this needs to get done. Or those people self-select out because it's just not working for them. And so I do think, having a good culture, having a good team culture goes a long way. But really, at the end of the day, that's one of the big leadership challenges that I think every company faces, every school group faces, every friend group faces at times. And if you want to be a leader someday, and you want to be a good leader someday, you've got to have a way of coming at that. And I honestly think the first and best way is just asking somebody, hey, what's going on? See where it goes from there.
Thank you. Okay, Kale, I think I'm going to bring you over. You raised your hand. If you can unmute.
Hi, I want to know how big your team is.
How big your team is? Did you hear? How big your team that you the team that you work with, how big is that?
Well, it's pretty big now. Yeah. I sort of work cross company now. I have a bunch of responsibility. I do a bunch of corporate strategy. I do sustainability. So you've probably heard ESG. I do a bunch of that stuff. I do board engagement. I do market fundamentals, which is trying to understand sort of what the global economy looks like, what the North American economy looks like, and what's the corresponding commodity price going to look like for oil, natural gas, and liquids. And then I'm kind of a jack of all trades too. I just go and help a bunch of different people when they run into problems and challenges. So I have quite a diverse role, and I really like that part of it. Each of my days doesn't look like the last one. Some of my big career accomplishments was I took a $120 billion company and split it into two companies, and that was Encana and Synovus. I've done some giant acquisition, $8-10 billion acquisitions. I've done a bunch of mentorship and culture building stuff too, right? I've done a bunch of team building stuff. So I kind of am a jack of all trades, kind of a guy. I don't know the exact size of the team, but it would be relatively large.
And we had one come in, their mic is not working, so I will read it. What is the single most important trait of a valuable team member, and how would you describe your leadership style?
Single most, well, you know what, maybe I'll answer the leadership style first. My leadership style is to never hire somebody that's just like me, because, and I don't know if you guys can all see me, but if I was to take a bunch of me's and stack them on top of each other, what have I got? Well, I've got additional capacity. I can do more work, but I can only do the work that I know. I can only do the work that I understand. I can only do the work that that I have some knowledge about. Whereas if I look to hire a team with a bunch of diverse people that sort of form a wheel, and I do a good job of connecting them, what I've done is I've increased my capacity. I have more people, but I've also increased my capability, because now I have more diverse opinions, ideas, skill sets that are all contributing to the same. So I'd much rather have capability and capacity than just capacity. Now, would it be easier to just work if I had a whole bunch of me's or people who are exactly like me? Maybe, but I can be a bit of a pain in the ass too. So I'm not sure that'd be the best way to spend my career either, is just managing a whole bunch of people that are like me. And I think, you know, that dovetails into that attribute is, you know, people that are willing to respectfully share their opinions and to challenge ideas, and to come with new ideas. You know, I always tell people I don't run a complaints department, I run a solutions department. So if you come to me with a complaint, the first question I'm going to ask you is, well, what are we going to do about it? If you have no ideas on what we're going to do about it, I'm going to say, I appreciate your complaints, but this isn't the complaint department. So go back, think about a solution, come back, and then we can talk about it and put it together. You know, I think good character people, though, at the end of the day, and that's, for me, again, is the attitude, commitment, and accountability. Those are the character attributes of Blake that I bring to the table. Not everybody's has to look like mine. They don't have to use the same words, but do you have some things that you hold yourself accountable to that are going to make you a good team member? Are you going to be easy to work with? Are you going to compromise? Are you going to recognize you can't always get your way? And we see this a lot, you know, young people, and I was a young person once too, and you want to get promoted and you want to get recognized and you want all this great stuff. And it's like, hey, I'm working really hard. Yeah, you are working really hard. And I get it and I appreciate it. But so is this person, and so is this person. And so, you know, it's recognizing how people fit in, where people fit in, where can you make the biggest impact, and really leveraging that. But I think it's just being a good character person. I tell people all the time, I do a bunch of mentorship for universities, and I say to them, look, if you come with a good attitude, you're committed and you're accountable, we can teach you the rest. And honestly, we can. But if you've got a bad attitude, you've got no commitment to it, or you're not going to be accountable to anything, I can teach you, but are you the person I should be teaching to do it? Or can I spend my time with someone else that's taken a different approach to it? So I think a valuable team member is recognizing how can I contribute? And then once you recognize that, you give it 100% or 110% and you get after it. These are tough questions.
Thank you. Can you talk? You talked to that. You mentioned that what you do is accountability. And I know we have a lot of young people in that come through our programs that are kind of interested in oil and gas and energy and kind of sustainable future for that. So, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you and Canada does in those areas?
For sure. Yeah. So, you know, I think a lot of people don't recognize just how much oil and gas the world uses. So we used about 102 million barrels a day of oil sort of last week. the week before that. During the pandemic, we went down to about 70 million barrels a day. So you think everything is kind of shut down or significantly scaled back. We still used about 70 million barrels of oil a day. Oil requirement, oil demand is forecasted to grow to 120 million barrels a day in 5 years and 140 million barrels a day in 10 years. So, oil, natural gas liquids, which are called NGLs, are all forecasted to significantly grow. Now, we recognize that there's some environmental challenges, and what those exactly are, I think we're still all trying to figure out. I think there's a lot of emotion behind where the world is going and the plight that we find ourselves in, and the potential cliff that we're driving over. But I also think that it's good to have that emotion and that energy around it. That's going to provide the fuel to figure it out. How do we get there? What do we have to do? But I also think we need to think critically about what our options are, what our choices are, because you can't use 100 million barrels of something and then just say, well, it's going to be zero. Our quality of life would go from halfway decent to non-existent if we just decided to turn it all off. So, in light of that, I think, companies like ours are recognizing that, look, we need to be a solutions finder in this. We need to start making a valuable contribution to lowering things like emissions, and we're doing that. We've lowered our emissions by 50% over the past 3 years. We've taken our biggest emitters and our most impactful emitters, which is methane in our case, and basically said, we're going to grind that down to zero. We're going to find ways to take all of our methane emissions out and not emit them into the environment. We've also made commitments to reduce our CO2 emissions. We're tying it to compensation across the company by 50% by 2030, and then reevaluate it from there. Now, I can take out all of the emissions from the company that I possibly can. Obviously, as we burn oil and natural gas, we're also creating emissions as consumers. And so we need to figure out ways to reduce those emissions as well. And so, we're a part of some of those efforts, but you see companies like Tesla or Ford Motor Company, different sort of frontward facing entities that you guys would be familiar with, are making a concerted effort to reduce emissions. I do think, though, that the biggest challenge that we face is, how do we make sure we don't erode our quality of life in an effort to reduce emissions in a fashion that isn't going to be equitable for everyone. And what we do learn is that when we talk about energy density, oil, a barrel of oil and a molecule of natural gas are probably the most dense, save for nuclear energy, the most dense energy sources that we have. Solar, super valuable; wind, super valuable. The problem is they're just not that dense. You need a lot of solar panels and a lot of windmills to equal 1 barrel of oil. And the challenge is, if the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, now you need a way to store it, and it gets challenging. And so I think we have to figure out what those challenges look like, and we need to make a concerted effort to figure that out. Companies need to want to be part of the solution. And I think some comfort for the young people is, shareholders. So we're a publicly traded company. We have 250 million shares outstanding. So there are 250 potential owners. Now, obviously, some people own, there's an entity that owns 10% of our stock, so they own a significant number of shares. So there are 250 million individual owners, but there are 250 million votes. And the consistent feedback that we get from the owners of this company is, we need you to care a whole bunch about sustainability the E, the S, and the G, and we need you to do a good job of it. And we're committed to that, and that's why it's on our scorecard, and it's a big part of how our company is valued externally by shareholders.
Thank you. I think even when you start by saying, number one, it's part of our culture, and two, there's money tied to it, that there's definitely a level of commitment when, you put the dollars behind it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other piece too, is the S side. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big thing that we all need to be thinking about, and making sure that people have access to opportunities and people have good access to education, that we're hiring young women, we're hiring people from different cultures and people with different perspectives. And that's really valuable again too, because I don't just want to build a team, or we don't just want to have a company that's a whole bunch of people that think the exact same way. We're going to need diversity of thought to solve some of these big challenges. And so I think that's another piece that shareholders are starting to really dig in and say, this is important. And we do a bunch of reporting on it now that we didn't do 5 years ago, and maybe we should have been. We didn't, we're doing it now. And it's really important, and we're measured on what that looks like, and how the company is getting more diverse, equitable, and inclusive for people.
So one of the questions, and I think you've hit on this at different points, but what's that, one of the questions I like to ask at all of these things is, what's that one piece of advice you would go back and tell your high school self? I know I need to prepare people for this one in advance, but.
That's such a good one. I think, that 15 to 18, when I kind of sort of took that give up mentality, it was just easier not to try than it was to face failure. When I think about how many mistakes I make mistakes every single day. And if you've got a commitment to fixing them and to learning from them, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. I mean, again, don't go break the law. Those are all mistakes that we know. I mean, career mistakes, or make a mistake in how you think about something, or how, just having that confidence, building the confidence in myself to be self-confident, or start to move towards being self-confident, because it's both humbling and empowering. And being self-confident isn't being cocky or arrogant. It's the exact opposite of that. Being self-confident is the empowerment to recognize I can help that person be successful, and that person be successful. I can build people up. I can be the one that says, hey, we can take a chance on that. I think we can figure out how to make it work. So I think what I would tell myself is, don't look at all the warts and think I'm never going to be able to turn this into anything. Look at all the positives, and then just keep taking one step at a time to build something. If I looked at Elon Musk and said, well, I'm going to be Elon Musk, well, that's a pretty daunting task. But if I really wanted to be Elon Musk, and I'm not sure I do, what would I have to do? I'll take one step at a time. Don't try and eat the whole pizza in one bite. Just take one bite at a time. And that's that understanding what you want to be and having a bit of a path. And I think people in this chat are starting to get to the age and demographic where they're going to be thinking about that. What do I want to be? What do I get enjoyment out of? Why would I want to do this? And to start thinking about that, and then just taking some small steps to start building that out. And if you spend a couple of years and you're like, you know what, I actually don't want to do this. That's not failure though either. That's just a big learning. And you're going to take all those learnings and you're going to build them into the next thing that you do. And that would be the thing that I would tell myself today is all the failures. I've learned so much more from the failures than I have from any of the successes. And the successes have lasted 10 minutes where everybody pats each other on the back, and that's great, and we did it, and hooray. But really the joy was figuring it out, having it be a success. Once it was a success, it was on to the next thing. It was really the failures that's where I learned the most. And that's probably what I take with me and has saved me from even bigger blunders or bigger failures today and hopefully tomorrow too. And I'm going to make another mistake and I hope it's not big, but I'm going to make mistakes and I know it. And I just got to be willing to recognize that and be willing to do whatever I need to do to fix it and make sure I learn from it so I don't do it again.
Thank you. Students, we might have time for one more question if you want to put it in the chat. In the meantime, you had mentioned that you have found some mentors along the way, and now you're kind of giving that back to other people. How did you find those people? Did you seek them out? Did you formally ask them to invest in you, or was it kind of just a natural affinity?
Yeah, the university professor definitely sought me out. I think he kind of took a look at me and was like, man, this young man needs a bit of guidance. And so he probably found me. But after that, it was probably a blend, just right time, right place. But then it's also taking people up on their offer. I mean, I can't see anybody's faces, but if anybody was like, well, I'd like to talk to that guy because I have a question, or hey, I need some help, I'd like to talk to somebody. Well, ask the people facilitating this or the program for my phone number. I'll talk to you. I mean, I think that's people that want to be mentors. And sometimes they're mentors by accident. Sometimes they're mentors on purpose. You know, they're not looking for it maybe in the sense that, well, I got to find somebody today, but they kind of got their eyes and their ears open to, hey, like I'm seeing somebody over there where things are going really good and maybe I can just help keep it on the tracks for them. Or I don't know if things are going that great. Maybe I need to go over and just offer an ear and be willing to have a conversation. And then I have heard some people, you know, I do what they call a career library up at the University of Calgary, and people, it's like a library book. They can check me out for 15 minutes and I sit at a table and it's just people that rotate through. Every 15 minutes it's somebody else and they just hit me with whatever's coming at them. There's no introductions, there's no this, there's no that. They've read the back of my book jacket, kind of know enough about me. Man, I have heard some things and people have shared some really, really big things in their lives, some really big challenges that they're facing. And some of them I'm wholly unqualified for, but I'm committed to helping them find the right person to get the questions that they need answered so that they can continue to move forward. So, you know, I've sought some out. I've asked some people, hey, like, and I'm not all the time, do you want to be my mentor? It's more, hey, I'd like to ask you a few questions, or I'd like to go buy you lunch, or I'd like to buy you a soft drink or whatever, and sit down and have a conversation. And some people have said, no, I don't want to do that. And okay, that's cool, on to the next thing. But I think people that care, people that want to do a good job of it, people that recognize, and I hope I'm one of those people, that there's no chance I get here if I was left to my own device. I wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have been able to put it together. I needed some people to be willing to invest their time and their effort into me. And I recognize that now. And that's why I take mentorship and sessions like this seriously, is because I know the impact that it had for me. And if I can have that impact or half that impact for just one person, then it's been worthwhile.
Thank you. We did have one more question come in that if you're okay on time to answer.
Sure.
Okay. Mark, I'm going to bring you over if you could unmute.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the questions, this is more like a human nature question, but would you say that maybe like people like your position of power or so are doing it more to like fulfills like some sort of void for control, or is it really for the greater good of the company?
That's a great question, Mark. You know, for me personally, I take my cues from the people around me, on my team, or the people that work for me. They can give me feedback anytime they want, and they can come in and say, hey man, you really suck at this and you need to do better. And I'm gonna listen, because I want to do better. I want to see the people here be successful. I want the people that have invested in this company to earn a rate of return. Maybe they have their entire retirement fund invested in this company. I wouldn't suggest that you should do that, but maybe they've done that. I want their retirement to be great. I want the young couple or the young person who's invested in the company to get a great return. So for me, I'm trying not to fill a power vacuum or a void. And honestly, I try to limit my amount of control. And I hope you hear that in the language that I pick. I try never to talk about the people that work for me or stand on the shoulders of their successes and call them my own. I'm the first person I try to be the first person to say, this person did a great job, that person did a great job, this team did a great job, because it matters to me, the well-being of people at this company, of people in this city, of people in Denver, of people in Houston, of people in the woodlands there. It matters to me. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think everybody takes that same approach. And that's part of the challenge is navigating that. And I always tell people, like, hey, if you think that I'm not good at this, or you think I'm doing it for the wrong reasons and you don't want to work here, I'll help you get the next job. But that's how people vote, is they vote with their feet. If you don't like working for a company, or you don't agree with what the company is doing, there's lots of companies. Go find a company that you do agree with. Go find a company that you think you can be successful at. Start your own company and rock on. I think there's a bunch of different ways to do that, and all of them are challenging. I'm not going to lie. This isn't just to snap your fingers. It's a lot of hard work for sure, but it's worth putting the work in, and just make sure that what you value as a person, you work for a company that has similar values. Otherwise, you're just doing it for a paycheck. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that either. There's lots of people that work here that this is a paycheck to them, and they want to go home and go camping or go hiking or spend tons of time with their kids. That's totally fine too. I get that. But if you're somebody that's like, I need to be really aligned with the company that I work for, just make sure you understand what you want to be aligned with, and then go see if you can find it. Because I do think if you're not paying attention, yeah, there's a chance you might end up working for a person that's looking to fill a void and just control and yell at people and grind on people and generally make life miserable just because they can. And it's super unfortunate, but that's a reality of the world today. And I hope you don't ever run into that. And if you do, have the confidence to pack your stuff up and go down the street or start your own thing. And that's risk, but be confident, you'll figure it out. I hope that answers the question. It's a good question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Well, for the sake of time, we want to thank you for your gift of time, for sharing a little bit of what you learned. I love the attitude, commitment, and accountability, and the fact everything else is teachable. And that is so true across industries, whether it's the type of thing that you do or elsewhere, students. I hope that's a good takeaway for you this evening. So we thank you for your time. I know that you can't see them all, but students, feel free to put in the chat your gratitude, your thanks, your applause. And with that, we will wrap. We appreciate everything you do. And once we stop recording, I want to ask you about University Library, because I think that's a great concept.
Yeah, you bet. Well, yeah.